Welcome to A Call to Action, a series presented by Great Eastern Radio and Brattleboro Community Television. We're covering many different topics from feeding your children in a crisis to wondering if your money will be left in the banks. Today, we're talking to Brattleboro Town Manager Peter Elwell, who has the unfortunate task of guiding us through this crisis here in Brattleboro. Welcome.
Thank you.
All
Good to see
right.
you, Peter.
Good to see you. All right, let's drill right into it. There's a lot of moving parts here as far as the municipality is concerned, and with the idea that, of course, nobody pandemics well, and nobody really knows truly what to do and how to do it. How do you feel thus far? How do you feel the town of Brattleboro is doing?
So I think that we're all fortunate in Brattleboro for the variety of ways in which we are finding ways together to navigate these uncharted waters. You're right. No matter all the emergency planning that's done around the normal kinds of disasters and emergencies that can happen because of environmental factors or a major fire we certainly experienced here years ago. Those sorts of things we know how to deal with. We have experience dealing with them. They are unpleasant at the time, but gearing up the response is something that is pretty accessible to us as a municipal government in terms of being ready for it and knowing how to ramp up the particular kinds of services and actions that are needed. Something like this is unprecedented for all of us, and particularly not just because of what it requires of us as organizations broadly and as municipal service delivery folks particularly, but beyond just the community impact, it's the fact that it's happening throughout the entire world. So society is so broadly affected that accessing the resources that assist us in dealing with these situations has been somewhat more difficult, but that now is beginning to flow, and that's going to be really helpful.
Yeah, no, I was having a conversation with somebody with regards to with 9/11 and Irene and the Brooks House fire and all these things that had impacted us nationally and locally, and they were easily defined, not easily dealt with, but easily defined, and there was a clear course of action as how to fix it, and
Yep.
you could make a trajectory as to when it would end and when it could be fixed, and if there were small
Right.
delays, you could work within those guidelines. Let me ask you a question, and I don't know if such a thing exists, but are you in contact with other town managers and finding out what they're doing?
Absolutely. So we're doing a lot of communication, both through the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and directly with the managers and other municipal officials that are in communities, relatively more similar in sort of the scale and full service operation that Brattleboro has. So, in Vermont, of course, there's not that many communities that have a operation the size of Brattleboro's for municipal services. And so we're actually a pretty tight group in normal times as well. We communicate a lot with each other about how we're dealing with different challenges. That's been really helpful through this, even though we have found that there are different ways in which different communities are meeting their own particular needs. Here in Brattleboro, one thing that I have come to really realize and appreciate in that communication I've had with other communities is the extent to which both existing organizations, like the many nonprofit social service delivery organizations that we have here in town, and ones that are popping up organically, particularly BAMA and the networking that they're providing between folks with needs and folks who can help meet those needs. But then just the widest variety of things too, like an adjunct to town government is the senior meals that are provided, and how quickly that ramped up to be a much more robust delivery of meals because it wasn't possible for folks to come together in the senior center. There's just story after story after story like that. And I'm feeling particularly fortunate. It's funny, you introduced the conversation we're having by saying that I had the unfortunate responsibility or something like that. I want to tell you, I actually feel really fortunate to be in the position that I'm in this community, able to work together with the town team for doing our part of this in the essential public services, the municipal services, but even more so for that broader rallying that the community is doing together. We have been that kind of place historically, And it's really showing the degree to which people are willing to step up and support others in need here in Brattleboro has been really shining during this COVID period.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I know you mentioned BAMA, which stands for Brattleboro Area Mutual Aid. Those folks have really done a really nice job of organizing and making sure that every little section and every little community within our community gets the support and has a couple of point people and things like that. Retreat Farm filling in the gap to try to
Right.
supply food. And of course, then there's Groundworks Collaborative, who just, I mean, are just working hard to keep everybody in the know and staying on top of everything and trying to remain that single point of entry for all these people that are food and housing insecure during this time. I mean, it is crazy.
Absolutely.
And
And those are actually two great examples, because right there is an example of Groundworks doing what they normally do, but stepping up to an entirely different level of doing it,
mhm.
and Retreat Farm repurposing itself in order to make sure that it is contributing well to addressing the needs in the community. That's the kind of thing that's happening around us. And so for those of us in town government with our ongoing responsibilities for the basic municipal services, it helps us to stay in our lane, to focus on making sure we're doing our piece well, and then to be in communication and collaboration with the others that are stepping up in so many different ways to provide support where they need it.
Right. No, and so when I they and when I used the word unfortunate, it was unfortunately that we're here is truly what I meant. But
Sure.
so far as this thing has kicked off, and we're probably about a month deep into this at this point, maybe a little less. I mean, like, what's been the biggest hurdle for the town of Brattleboro, or for you personally so far, is trying to navigate through all this?
It's been the unprecedented nature of it for sure. So the fact that you couldn't just sort of pull a plan off the shelf and couldn't draw on the experience we had the last time we dealt with a pandemic, right?
Right.
Because there was no last time. And so there was a lot of energy, a tremendously intense period of time starting about a month ago, actually a little longer ago in terms of the ramping up. And then with sort of the full on emergency response activity, it was about a month ago that began. Um, right up until maybe this past week or so, just this amazing intensity of having to figure out how to address situations, not just to move into sort of the extraordinary kinds of actions that are needed in emergencies. But it wasn't just activating that sort of effort, it was figuring out what the appropriate approach would be and then implementing it. And we did that over and over again in many different ways related to the field services, but even more so in sort of the behind the scenes support that goes on, the administrative functions. So much of what's going on in the field is similar to normal activities, but where there's extra precautions being taken because of COVID-19. In the administrative support, it's entirely different. Almost all of it's being done by town employees who are working from home. And so just setting up those systems and making sure that we were able to communicate and function in the ways that we need to just required creating things from scratch in a hurry. We're now at a place, 3-4 weeks into this, where that's running on a pretty even keel at this point. And we are, looking at making sure that we're, adequately filling those gaps in the community where we see that there are gaps that are needed, where services are required, and then also the looking towards the time when this will gear down. So while we can't really have an explicit plan for, on day 1 we do this and on day 5 we do that, just beginning to think about what it looks like to come out of the stay home, stay safe period and ramp back up into relatively more normal service delivery.
Right. So which will bring me to my next thing. I mean, let's do that. Let's just move forward to a place where the governor lifts his executive orders and says, like, non-essential businesses can start to open its doors again, and with the understanding that what you say today could change infinitely tomorrow, because that's just sort of been the way. But I mean, right now, as of this moment, which is tax day. Not anymore, but it would have been tax
Would
day.
have been, yep.
Yeah. Is there a town for is there a plan that the town has in place of what that might look like once non-essential businesses can open up?
Sure. So again, it's not an explicit plan yet. It's something that now that we're sort of on top of the day-to-day functioning in the stay home, stay safe period, we're beginning to think about what does that look like. And a lot of it is going to depend on the particulars of what the governor and the other state officials allow to happen in certain ways. So for instance, one area where we're not able to provide our full array of services right now is in the town clerk's office. There are still many things that are being provided through the computer. Access to records is still there, and there's communication ongoing. People can email and phone to the employees in the clerk's office, and we can answer questions for people. But there are some tasks that are important tasks that can't be done in the normal way, like the title searches that are done using the property records, particularly those before 1945. The ones since 1945 are digital, but prior to that, you got to go into the vault. And so there's things like that that we are not able to do that are actually going to be important to some folks in the community as they get, ramping back up into something more normal for their lives and their businesses. And providing those services to the community will be sort of the top priority. The things that we've had to shut down, we will bring back online as quickly as we can. And then there's the variety of ways in which the library and the recreation department provide, really important resources to people in the community that right now they're being, they're doing a lot of that in a very improvised way as much as they can with online services. That's relatively easier for the library team than it is for the recreation team, but both are working hard in that area. But, getting people to be able to come back into recreation programming and back into using the library in the building, interacting with folks is going to be an important part of our community working its way back towards something that feels more normal.
Yeah, and for retail shops, is there is it just gonna just to use an example, Vermont Artisans or Borough Specialized Sports downtown, I mean these are non-essential businesses that have been closed, and how does does the town sort of have recommendations or plans for when those orders are lifted and they're allowed to reopen, or have we not gone that far yet?
We won't go that far because one of the things we've been really conscious of in dealing with this, it's an important part of emergency management in general. So if there, at a time like a natural disaster, harken back to Irene throughout Vermont, in 2011, there were impacts in Brattleboro. Brattleboro needed to do, take care of its own emergency needs here, but in the broader context of what was going on throughout the state. So that communication with higher levels of government was a really important aspect of making sure the resources got to the right places. In this instance, it's not so much about the resources, although there is certainly that just in terms of money that needs to flow and is beginning to flow from the federal government and the state government to support households and businesses that are really negatively affected by the economic impacts of this COVID-19. But because of the public health, fundamentally, this is a public health emergency, right? The risk of reopening too quickly is all about the public health risks involved in that. Those won't be decisions made by the town. Those are going to be decisions made by the state of Vermont, in our case, and other governors elsewhere, with the best possible public health expert advice that they can receive. And we're following that guidance, and we have been from the beginning. So one of the decisions we made in that context, as we got our arms around the magnitude of this and what we were going to need to do as Brattleboro Town government with it, was be really conscious about focusing on doing our piece well and not trying to do other people's work. So, for instance, in the information that we're sharing out to the community, we're updating the status of town services and any changes in the town government services and the town government support from day to day. We're publishing a daily update that goes on the town's website, that goes out as a news release so that people can stay informed about what's happening within town government. But for the public health side of this, for the hospital side of this, for the business support side of this that's coming down through the state of Vermont and BDCC, and through household supports that are coming from the federal government and the state government, Department of Labor, and so on, what we're doing is posting links. We have posted links on the town's website, on the homepage, so they're easy to find and easy to use, that go directly to those other levels of government and those other service providers, so that people can get the best up-to-date information from the people who are actually expert in that area and responsible for those services.
Nope, that makes sense. As long as we can point them to a direction. What is that? Just for those who might not know, what is that website?
Sure, thank you. It's www.brattleboro.org.
Okay.
And right there on the homepage, that's going to take you to right in your face when you open up that homepage. It's a block of links related to COVID-19, some basic information about how to navigate it. And then there's 7 boxes. At the top, there's the town updates box where you can click into that and see whatever the latest information is from the town about the actions that we've taken and the things that we're dealing with within town government. And then underneath that are 3 on the left that connect to the hospital, to business supports, and to individual and household supports, and 3 on the right that connect into the different levels of public health expertise, the Vermont Department of Health, the CDC at the national level, and the World Health Organization.
Right. So I know that there's been a lot of businesses. I did one of these call to actions with Kat McGraw, and when I talked to her, I was really impressed as to how ahead of the curve they were and how prepared they were for this. The Brattleboro Food Co-op, which it seemed was a co-op on a Tuesday, and this unrecognizable thing that delivered food to you the back of your car the next. So there's been a lot of other businesses, and I'm remiss in just pointing out those 2. I understand that there's a lot of people. I know Brown and Roberts is offering curbside and having to reinvent. Is there anybody that has just that you have noticed that maybe we can just chat about for a second, that has really just kind of gone above and beyond to kind of help through this whole crisis?
We've called out a few. We need to do that sort of as the examples of what we're talking about. But I'm reluctant actually to say, this one or these 2 have done something even greater than the rest. There is a tremendous amount of important and good work being done in those ways that we've talked about, and
Right.
and some of it, so again, back to the couple of examples, some of the examples we've already talked about. So you think about what the co-op has done, the how nimble they were about adjusting the manner in which they provide the service, so that it could be provided better and safer for people, was amazing.
Yeah.
And it is still their core service that they're providing. And then Retreat Farm, again, as an example of an organization that could have simply shut down and said, well, until COVID's over, we don't do what we do. And instead said, we're going to do something else because we can and because the community needs us to. And back to Bama as something that grew up in the course of just a couple of days and is getting built still greater as we speak, as the way in which folks can find each other, in those who need things and those who can meet those needs. So it's been really exciting to watch that happen. There's certainly been a tremendous amount of hardship for everyone involved in this. But I'm just so grateful that there are so many different ways in which individuals and organizations in the community have risen to the occasion, to be a community, to be in community as we work our way through this.
So now I think most people now are starting to receive their stimulus checks. Most people don't know what to do with them. They're just there. Some people need them. So let's talk about some basics that comes to do with rents, taxes, otherwise. Is the municipality of Brattleboro in a place where they can forgive, delay payment from taxpayers or property tax? Maybe just specifically to landlords so that they can give their tenants a little relief. I mean, is there any plan like that in place?
There isn't, and there can't be at this time. Under the state statutes that allow for municipal taxation, that's really very specific as to how one is granted relief from the obligation to pay on time. And so, and then, there's also a meeting action locally that happens in accordance with those statutes. So for the schedule, the actual schedule we follow, and here in Brattleboro. So none of that can be just changed by the select board or by town staff. So the rules as they exist normally still exist for taxes, which means the next tax payment will be due on May 15th. There is a process always available to taxpayers, and certainly we expect it to be utilized more heavily this year than usual for tax abatement. There are, if someone just doesn't have the ability to pay, they have the ability to appeal their taxes and explain their circumstances and receive some relief from the Board of Abatement, which includes the Select Board, but also other folks from the community who sit together and hear the situation, hear the evidence of why someone can't pay, and then make a decision about granting that relief. So the abatement process exists both for taxes and for utility payments. But the state legislature is giving some consideration to granting additional flexibility to municipalities around these issues of taxation. So it's possible that there may be some additional flexibility granted, and then the Select Board would need to give consideration to how that might be implemented here in Brattleboro. What we have done and moved quickly to do a month or so ago in the beginning of this was in those things where there is more flexibility built into the law, the overarching law that's just always in place related to these different municipal activities. The town operates a revolving loan fund where we provide funding to help businesses start and grow in Brattleboro. And those businesses who are in the process of repaying loans to that fund, we immediately advised them at the beginning of this that they could stop those payments indefinitely. We'll see how long that needs to last. And then, at some point during the recovery from all of this, that schedule will pick back up again, but they won't have to catch up. Let's say it's 3 months or let's say it's 6 months, then 3 or 6 months will be tacked on to the end of the loan, and
Right.
they'll just be able to sort of pick back up and keep going. That we did right away. More broadly for the community, of course, was shutting down parking enforcement. It was clear that the businesses were going to be very severely impacted by this. And so even before it became unsafe to be out and about in the community, we shut down parking enforcement so that people would not have to pay that and would not be getting tickets that they would have to pay. Unfortunately, this thing ramped up so quickly that was only in place for about a week, and then stay home, stay safe happened, and all the businesses had to really shut down. So that ended up being of limited actual financial benefit to folks, but it was a way in which town government could be a bit more nimble in relieving an obligation to pay.
No, I think that's good. I mean, in places like Brown and Roberts are still open, offering curbside. So know that if you have to, you don't have to feed the meter. I mean, it just every
Yep.
little bit helps.
Yep.
One
Right.
any little thing that can relieve a little bit of stress, like trying to find a quarter so you can feed the meter, is been a
Right.
and I think it's a help.
There's also, in terms of, again, the different levels of government and the different responsibilities that we have in something like this, it's not yet clear the degree to which the actions from the federal government and the state government are going to adequately support individual households and businesses to be able to meet obligations like an individual paying rent or a landlord paying taxes. And so we're going to have to just work through this and see, as that money begins to flow, both in the business supports and in the unemployment insurance and the just straight payments to households for stimulus, do those systems operate effectively enough that the cash that's injected by those higher levels of government actually allows lower levels of government to keep functioning in a relatively more normal manner? We just don't know yet. And so it's one of those things we'll be really keenly paying attention to as we move from this active emergency response period into a recovery period.
Yeah. So Peter, is there anything else that maybe that we haven't covered that you really feel like we need to get out there?
I think we've covered a great plenty. I would say just a shout out to all of those employees, municipal employees, and everyone else who is continuing to go out into the community to do the work that they do, because that work is essential to public safety and public health. And so, certainly for all of us, that, first and foremost is represented by the healthcare workers, but within town government, certainly it's the firefighters and the police officers and the field employees at public works and at parks that are keeping our public spaces safe, so people can get out and can get some exercise and receive the emergency services that are necessary. And then folks who are working at the grocery stores and working at Brown and Roberts and all the other places that are staying open in order to meet urgent community needs during this period when most everyone has been told to stay home. So for their own safety and for the broader community health benefits of that, it's again it's just really something I think we all need to be remaining focused on and grateful for is the degree to which there are individuals right here in our community and across the country that are going out every day and incurring some amount of risk. And we're doing everything we can to provide the proper equipment and proper precautions to protect employees. But by the nature of the work they're doing, they're exposed to more risk than those of us who are staying home more completely.
True.
So just a big thank you both within our town team for that as well as out into the community.
No, and I'll echo that. All of those folks that you mentioned are just doing a terrific job and trying to keep everything greased and moving forward as best they can. And as you pointed out, not everybody is able in those positions to keep that 6 foot distance. So,
Right.
I think just a little extra thought before you fall asleep at night, sent their way would be most appreciated for sure. Uh, Peter Elwell, thank you for jumping on a call to action today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, maybe we'll do this again. We'll get an update maybe in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
All right.